Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast with Michael Becker and Paul Peebles. During this program, you will hear interviews with real-life successful investors who will share their stories and provide useful advice on how to acquire, finance, and operate apartment complexes. Now, here they are, Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. Typically, the governor of the great state of Texas, Mr. Michael Becker, would be with us, but he is on another due diligence assignment, so we wish him and his teammates over at SPI the best luck of walking 150 units today. So in the podcast, we have a friend of ours that we've known for a long period of time, Mr. America, I would call him, Mr. Lane Bean. Lane, how are you?
Paul, I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me to share your podcast with your audience today.
So the theme of the podcast today is really protection of a couple of different things. One, protection of your friends, protection of your country, and protection of partnerships, specifically in real estate. And so I couldn't think of a better person to kind of just have a general discussion with Lane Bean. So Lane and I have known each other for a number of years. You've heard him on the podcast in the past, and his group over at Pilot Legacy, they buy commercial real estate, they buy apartments, and I want to kind of visit with him concerning just today's general theme about protection. And so a lot of people don't know Lane, so I'm going to give you kind of a background. So Lane comes from Fort Worth, Texas, and he played high school ball. And when he played high school football, he got to play at the United States Air Force Academy. So, Lane, what position did you play at the Air Force Academy?
Well, Paul, thank you for bringing up long thought about memories and my career playing football. I loved playing football at the Air Force Academy. We had such a great team. And because we were often undersized, we had to emphasize teamwork. And like you're talking about, partnerships, teamwork was essential to success. And boy, I learned so much on the athletic field that teaches those principles. And specifically for your answer, Paul, I played defense. I was a defensive end. I played all 4 years, and we had a pretty successful team. We played in the Western Athletic Conference and did well.
So any funny stories about playing for the Air Force Academy in a team-like atmosphere over there? How was that coach, and how difficult was it to play for that coach?
Well, our coach was Fisher DeBerry. He was from Charleston, South Carolina, and he had more country witticisms than the Beverly Hillbillies. And so everything was a turtle on a fence post. That was one of his common things. But he was foundationally solid. He was a man of great character, of great team, and team first. I mean, it was just a remarkable community and a culture of teaching that, and understanding your position on the team, understanding your role and responsibility was essential to success, and it contributed to our results. And we had a winning season all the years I was there. We beat Army and Navy and went to and won the Commander-in-Chief's trophy. And we got a chance to go to the White House and meet with George Bush Sr., which was really neat. And we got a chance my senior year to play in the Liberty Bowl against Ohio State. And we were expected to be slaughtered, and we beat them. And so there's a lot of good highlights that I could go on and on and on and bore your audience to death about how great I thought I was, but I certainly had a great time.
So you did better. It'd be difficult for you to play by yourself, but with a team behind you and around you, you did much better. So you had a lot of protection to do well. Let's kind of move to when you left the Air Force Academy, you flew for the United States Air Force. And what type of an airplane did you fly for the United States Air Force protecting our country?
Right. So then my second passion was aviation. And so after I graduated from the Air Force Academy, I entered pilot training through the Air Force, and then completed that. And then I returned to the flight instruction area, and I was an instructor pilot down in South Texas and Del Rio, Texas, for several years. And then I got an assignment to F-16s. So the F-16 active duty career for about 7 or 8 years. And then I separated from the active duty and joined the Air Force Reserves here in Fort Worth, again, flying F-16. So my total amount of flying service is just shy of 30 years. And I have about 5,100 military hours. And the good part is the number of landings and takeoffs are the same. So I was a successful pilot in that regard because every takeoff has one credit on the credit line. So
now you flew over, was it Afghanistan or Iraq during the war? Tell us maybe a little bit about the stuff that you were doing to kind of protect the country and your teammates on the ground.
Sure. Well, I could go on and on about this, but I've flown to a lot of combat areas. You know, my time in the service was from 1990 to 2020. And so during that time, our focus was on the Middle East and stabilizing those areas. And that's why I flew most of my missions in combat in Saudi Arabia, in Turkey, in Kuwait, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. And I've had a lot of experience doing that and seeing, you know, those combat scenarios and evaluating the risk, evaluating the mission objectives, and making sure that we could meet those mission objectives and minimize risk, right? That was the name of the game. Send everybody, hit the target, right? Or whether it was a vehicles or whatever the target may be, and then bring everybody back, right? So that was the goal on every mission, the objective on every training mission, on every combat mission: maximize return, minimize risk, right? That's what we said, and that's how we did it. And that is exactly what we do in business. And so there's a lot of carryover on thinking. Obviously, it's a different environment, but there is just a tremendous amount of effort that goes into doing that. And so I've been able to take some of those skills and parlay them into business.
Any war stories flying over Iraq or Afghanistan at night?
Absolutely. So we, we're always in the game of making sure the mission's done. And so one of the nights we were flying, and this was in Serbia. Now, this was around 1999 or 2000 when there was a civil war going on, and Kosovo was trying to break away from Serbia. And then the Serbian president, was contributing some human issues there. So we were deployed there, and I was one of the F-16s that was airborne at about 2 a.m. So a very, very dark night. And we went over into protect those areas that we were charged to do. And then all of a sudden, my radar detector, if you will, is called a raw warning receiver, which shows you where the target or the enemy is, just started going crazy. Like when you're driving 85 and a 65 and the radar detector lights up, it gets your attention. That's what it was. And so I looked off my right wing in the direction that I was being targeted. And sure enough, on the ground, it looked like a brilliantly white circular light was right on the ground. I was about 2 miles high. And then that combined with the radar warning detector, I knew I was being shot at by a surface-to-air missile. And they had already shot down 2 F-16s in the previous month. So this was a real threat to us and to me. And so I started to maneuver. And every turn that I made, the missile that was tracking on me made a turn. So I would make another turn. It would make another correction to its course. And so I thought, boy, this is going to be it. It's correcting, it's tracking me. And at the final minutes, or the final seconds, if you will, this whole thing only lasted 30 seconds. At the final portion of that missile, it dropped behind me, and then it exploded about a half mile behind me. No damage to me, other than just a couple of heartbeats there for a minute. But that was the one where we were all working together, and we work together on every mission like that, regardless of how you are engaged or you're not engaged.
So you had the teamwork at the Air Force Academy playing football. You had the teamwork, and you were in the jets getting shot at. And then you got out of the Air Force and you started to buy real estate. So tell me a little bit about buying real estate, whether it's single family or multifamily, and let's try to tie everything together about what's going on in today's environment? Because we're talking about protection today.
Sure. Well, I started to buy real estate while I was still in the service. And then once I got out of the service, I made that my full-time focus. And so what I tell everybody, and this is so important, is when we were flying, the risk of making a mistake was lethal. Either one, you could be injured, you could injure someone, or the mission wasn't accomplished. So you just couldn't afford mistakes. The level of performance and expectation is at the highest mark. And so what that caused us to do is we would prepare to the best of our ability on what we thought was going to happen, but we spent as much time preparing for what could happen, but not planned to happen. In other words, let's say that Paul and I are out flying today and we're going to go out and protect a target, or we're going to go out and drop bombs on a target. But Paul, you're my wingman or I'm your wingman, and you don't have enough bombs or you don't have enough fuel. That's not planned, but it could happen because of some malfunction, or it could happen because of weather. Now, what's the analogy there is we would talk about that scenario ad nauseum, and we would talk about stuff in the flight briefing and in our preparations, and we would plan for the contingencies that never happened. Like I said, I have an equal number of takeoff and landings, so I never had to eject from an F-16, nor did many people I know. However, we talked about that continually, and we planned for it. And we said, in the event this happens, this is our plan B. This is our fallback plan. That was so important because rarely did that ever come to fruition. But when it did, we were so well prepared because we had talked about it and planned for it that we knew what to do. Okay, that was my military 30 years of training. I'm very proud of that. How do I bring that into business? Okay, so when I go to underwrite a deal or I go to look at deals, we have a planned scenario, a planned business model. This is what we want to happen. This is the revenue lines. This is the expense lines. These are the things that we know we're going to have to fix. And we plan for that and we publish that. But what I've learned is let's plan for what may happen. It's not expected and it's not desired, but we need to plan for, hey, what if interest rates change? How will we protect ourselves? What if occupancy is different than planned? What if the market doesn't mature? And so that portion of being ready for the unexpected is vital to business, because 2022, there were a lot of unexpected changes that no one forecast.
Yeah, let's talk about 3 transactions that you specifically had to deal with in 2022. One is a deal that you did not do. Another is a deal that you did, you closed on. And 3 is a deal that you're in the middle of working through right now. So without saying names and places, let's talk about the deal that you did not do and tell us a little bit about why you did not do it. And let's give some people some initial background.
Sure. Yeah, great questions there, Paul, and certainly have application to the current market and then this approaching market. This last year, we were positioned to buy a nice asset in Central Texas market, and it was just working out really well. We were working and we got it under contract at what was a good market price. And this is the January, February of this 2022. And we were making strong progress. We had done a lot of the due diligence. We had done the site inspection. We had done our initial debt quote. We were starting to line up the equity. And then right around that time was when the Federal Reserve began to aggressively change their monetary policy and began to elevate the interest rates. And they elevated a lot of our lenders that were quoting for us on the debt side began to become very conservative. And it got to a point where the debt structure and the capital structure just started to unwind. And it didn't make sense because interest rates were so accelerated that the deal just didn't pencil anymore. And unfortunately, we were under contract with some non-refundable money on deposit, and we had to walk away from that. And it was really quite an easy decision, but obviously it left a pretty big bruise. but it just wasn't wise to go forward. And if we would have gone forward with it, then we would have been in bad financial position today. And so that was a deal that we had to walk away from earlier in 2022 that I've learned a lot from, but it's a casualty of 2022.
It was a casualty for you guys in 2022. And without sharing all kinds of company secrets, you guys had a lot of money that was pushed over to the seller, trying to negotiate with the seller to try to get a lower sales price, just because in real estate, it's really based on cash flow and future cash flow. And you just saw with interest rates rising and the ability to maybe not hit the performance markers of rental increases, the property just was not going to be valued at what you were under contract with. And you had earnest money, and I'll just use the casual piece, between $500,000 up to $1 million, somewhere in between there, that was your money and your partner's money. It wasn't the limited partner's money that was in there, but it was the kind of the general partner that was putting out the pursuit costs into the deal. And you took one for the team, so to speak, because when you walked away from the deal, they kept your money. And you felt, again, protecting the limited partners was a better thing for you to do. And I would use the analogy is that, even though you lost the battle, you weren't able to close and they captured your money, in the long run, you were able to win the war. Because what did that do for your limited partners, seeing that you guys put your money up in the deal, it did not work out, but you didn't get into a deal that was going to jam you in the future, that the limited partners may have lost their money. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right on, Paul. What you're talking about, I like to refer to as monetary capital. That's the limited partners, the general partners' money, monetary capital, or relationship capital and rapport capital. And so we did lose monetary capital, and that was a general partnership. That was mine and the other general partners that we had to walk away from. And that was really an easy decision, because let me kind of put it in a framework. Would you rather lose $5 today or $40 in the future? Well, the answer to that is easy, even though you lose $5 today, and it was more than that, of course, but that's the question that we had to ask, and we could have pressed through it. But had we done that, we would have jeopardized and we would have sold relationship capital and investment character. And that's not the way to move forward. If you were in it for the short term, but we're playing long ball here. We want to maintain our investors. We want to treat them well, and we want to treat their money like we would want our own to be treated. And if that means that you have to take a loss sometimes and a black eye, then that's what happens. And that's the example of what I'm explaining.
Yeah. So protecting the partnership is the key, is because if you're going to be a long-term player, you've got to protect your partners that are bringing the equity into the deal. And it was best for Lane and his general partnership to take the hit than limited partners, because he gained an incredible amount of respect capital, so to speak, with his limited partner. So good for him. And then, the market changed a little bit, and you guys went back out of the market, and seeing what was going on, you guys actually closed on another deal. So you pivoted for this this big loss for you guys internally, but then you guys went to buy another property up in the North Texas area. And tell us a little bit about that and how you structured that and how did that work out?
Yeah. So, Paul, if you're playing with last year's strategy and tactics, you're going to go bankrupt in many situations. And this in 2021, 2022, 2023 requires a certain level of nimbleness and agility and strategy and tactics and business modeling that you really have to be sharp on many of these things. And like what you're mentioning, because the financial landscape had changed so aggressively over the last 12 to 18 months that you can't use last year's financial strategy today. It just doesn't make sense. And so when we got out of the deal that I explained that fell apart because of the lending, we still had raised some capital. And so we wanted to deploy that because there were still buying opportunities. And so we shifted to another project, but we changed our financing strategy to a much more reasonable and conservative debt position. And we used a tremendous amount of our equity that we had already captured to buy a slightly smaller property and a slightly smaller project, but it secured that investment money, and it also helped safeguard. I call it a safe harbor because of our loan to cost ratio is so small that the impact of interest rates and the impact of the economy is going to be minimized because we don't have much leverage on it. So that was the deal we pivoted to. And through a lot of good counsel with some smart operators and lenders and brokers like yourself and your team at Old Capital, we were able to put something in and close it and get a great return even after owning it for a short period of time. We closed it at the fall of this 2022. So I'm pleased with that acquisition.
But you put down on that deal, you didn't put down 20% or 25% and try to get a bank loan or a Fannie Mae loan or a bridge loan at 75% leverage. You put down 75% and only had a bank loan at 25% leverage because you wanted to take the risk. You wanted to have some protection to your limited partners. The limited partners saw that the landscape had changed. They still wanted to invest in commercial real estate. They wanted to get a hard asset and buy a hard asset, but they also wanted to get the tax ramifications of owning the real estate and the possible upside of the deal. So you bought a little bit of a smaller deal. And with the capital that you guys had already raised on deal number one, you just pivoted to buy deal number two and you put a whole heck of a lot of cash down. Now, that deal, now you look like a hero because that's kicking off a rate of return, even at that low leverage point that people are like, we didn't lose the $40. So in your analogy, we gained X amount of dollars in that deal and we're getting paid almost from the beginning a rate of return on our money. Am I saying that correctly?
You said that exactly right, Paul. Had we gone through the deal that fell through, I probably would be calling them for extra capital right now just to hold the property, not to make a return, but to hold the property. And so that confirmed our good decision to get out of that. And then we just distributed here at the end of the fourth quarter a good return to our partners on this smaller deal. And we only had it for about 60 days of that remaining year 2022, and it already was generating a return. So these are examples of pivots. These are examples of mitigating and being aware of risk in the marketplace, and then being adjustable and being nimble enough to change your strategy, change your financing. That's the biggest one that, that's impacted financing, and then the price game and just being aware of that in today's market is so important.
Yeah. And again, that deal number two that we're talking about, they put a tremendous amount of cash down initially, but when they do their rehab of the property, they'll pull a bunch of cash out when the markets start to settle down, and they'll go to a long-term permanent fixed rate at that period of time, or they'll sell the property. So, but by putting more cash down, it lowered the risk for the partnership. So again, another protection move. Let's talk about deal number three. And deal number three is a little bit different because it's a deal. Well, you tell us about deal number three. Tell us a little bit more about that. When you guys bought it, what's going on with it right now, and tell us a little bit about how you're protecting the partnership right now.
Well, this is a little bit more complicated than the standard new development. And it's also at the same time more complicated than the existing development because it's really a phase two. It's a project that has existing in place 2019 constructed buildings and units. It's 140 units in Central Texas. And we are building, because we have land that came with that purchase, an additional 145 units. So total, we're going to have 288 units there on the project there in Central Texas. And we've already bought phase one in land. We're already cash flowing those 140 Class A units. And we are in the process, and I say the process, it's been a 6 to 9 months where we are developing the plans, the architecture, the engineering, the site for the development of the 140. So that's kind of the framework of it. And there's been a lot of challenges, a lot of risk mitigation for the phase two, which is the construction of the new buildings. And like I've mentioned already, as you and your audience knows, the financing of that project, the labor shortages, the supply chain limitations, the shortages of essential equipment, I could just go on and on and on and cite these things that have been hurdles, that have been risk factors that, we've had to communicate to our investors. We've had to solve those problems, and we've had to, in some cases, slightly change or pivot our business model to make sure that what I was doing in the F-16, which is maximize return, minimize risk, I'm doing the same thing for our project in Central Texas. Maximize investor return, minimize investor risk.
So when they bought the first phase, again, the first phase came with some plans to the phase two. So the seller was comfortable. They thought that they were going to start construction in some period of time in the future. They didn't do it. They just sold the phase one to Lane and his partners. And so we did a bridge loan, because at that period of time, to pay that price, they had to do a bridge loan to try to get the max leverage on the deal. So they did a bridge loan with a bridge non-recourse debt fund lender. And they did, they put significant cash down on that. I mean, I think you guys put down what, 35% on that transaction?
We did, yes.
So they mitigated their risk on that. They could have put down 20% or 25%, but they put down significantly larger amount. But because a lot of people that bought properties in 2019, 20, 21, 22, that were using bridge funds, debt funds, these loans were tied to adjustable rates. And thinking that interest rates were going to remain flat, they underwrote the deal knowing that there possibly would be a risk in the future. With interest rates rising, that's the reason why they put so much cash into the deal. They still wanted to cash flow the property if interest rates have risen. And so what they're doing right now on the phase one piece, they see that interest rates are higher. And what they want to try to do is mitigate away from an adjustable rate and lock it up to a fixed rate on phase one. Just because if interest rates go any higher, they want to mitigate that risk in the future. So right now they're in the process of refinancing and getting a 10-year fixed rate, 30 or 35-year amortization on that loan, and paying off that loan that started off at, say, 3.5%, 4%. Now it's at 7.5%, 8%. So now they're going to be down to below 5% on this loan. So the NOI has gone up tremendously, and now they're able to qualify for a loan on that transaction. What else am I leaving off on that description of what's going on in that deal? You guys had to raise some additional money, though, too, just to even pay that loan down, so you're in a position to get these great terms.
No, you summed it up really well there, Paul. And what I've learned from that is, you just have to counsel with really sharp professionals that have that forward-looking optimism, like, Old Capital and like Harbor Loan and everybody that we've worked with, to get that good advice, because you just can't see around every corner in business. And as we approached this deal when we bought it, we were expecting, like you mentioned, flat interest rates or maybe a slight increase, and we didn't see a doubling of the interest rate. That was an unexpected turn that we had to pivot for. And a lot of people are facing that today as your limited partner audience and your general partner sponsors. How do you deal with that? Maybe an unexpected risk that you didn't see, and where can you find margin in other areas and become efficient in your operations, or become more efficient in your financing strategy? And that's where we were able to carve a little bit of margin out, is to recapture a better, more attractive financial situation with that. Like you mentioned, cash in refinance is going to minimize our risk and return a better position for our limited partners.
Yeah, I think there's another thing we want to mention kind of on that deal too, is that the original acquisition was to include almost going immediately to phase two. And just for some of the reasons that Lane threw out there with supply chain problems, just coming out of COVID, phase two didn't get started until late into the game, because our original thinking was we'd just do this bridge loan and it'd be on there for 18 months during the period of time that we were doing phase two. And we weren't expecting interest rates to go up, but we knew that when phase two was going to be built, because we were going to do that with a regional bank to do phase two, that we would pay off the phase one that had the non-recourse bridge loan, pay off the phase two that had the bank loan, and then we would just do one loan on both phase one and phase two. And that was what our thinking was. But seeing interest rates over a period of a year or two start to rise, we wanted to protect the limited partners position. So we're going to do phase one. We're going to do a fixed rate there. And then when phase two is fully complete, we'll do another fixed rate on that. And then it'll be operated as one property, but we'll have two separate loans on the deal with the same kind of the general partnership that will pretty much be the same. So, and the limited partners will pretty much be the same. So it's just mitigating the risk for your partners. And that's all comes down to protecting your limited partners. Again, we don't want to see anybody lose any money in this business. So just trying to figure out how to lower the risk levels of everything. And so just like Lane was able to do that when he played football for the Air Force Academy, he wasn't a single player. He used a team to beat the other teams, whether it was Navy or Army. And then, he lowered his risk by having other team members. Two, when he flew jets for the Air Force and F-16s, he didn't fly that by himself. He had a whole crew that helped him get into the jet. I mean, he had 16 people that helped him be able to be put in that cockpit, whether it was the avionics guys or the refuelers or the maintainers or all the staff that goes along with the squad. So he was trying to lower his risk by having qualified people surround him, and he was able to bring the aircraft back successfully. Like he said, his takeoffs equal to his landing. So good for him. And three, when he transitioned over to real estate, his major theme or thought process was to try to get the limited partners the lowest risk and the greatest performance as possible. And even though it cost him on the first deal we just talked about, it cost him a lot of money. I mean, and I'm talking about a lot of money. He was able to walk away from that. His limited partners said that his heart was in the right place and that we'll invest in that deal number two with him, seeing that these guys had taken a loss and that our best interests were held, and not just Lane and his general partner's best interest, is that it made economic sense to walk away from that deal. And sometimes you just have to walk away and not think about having an increased loss down the road. And some people are faced with increased losses coming down the road. And then three, on this property that we just talked about here, phase one and phase two, he wasn't expecting interest rates after he acquired the phase one property to go up significantly as it has. And now he's out there trying to protect his limited partners for any additional risk on the deal and try to lock the deal up as quickly as possible. So he's done a great job with communicating to his partners. One of the things that I'm going to put this in the podcast notes, is that you'll see he puts out on a monthly basis, him and his partner, Rich, do a video that gives kind of an overview of the construction progress. And I want you to take a look at it because communication is so important. They learned doing this on a number of projects back a while ago when they built a 300-unit apartment building in Maynard, Texas, which is a suburb of Austin. And the lender just absolutely loved all the communication that he had with the lender, but also with the limited partners about what was going on with that transaction. I want you to take a look at that video that we'll include and see if you can, I know it's a lot of work, but see if you can emulate and try to copy what Lane and his partners have done just to get the message out of what's going on. So, because there's a lot of general partners in this last, say, 6 months have been heads down in the sand, and then I have not been communicating the good or the bad of what's going on. So I'm a big advocate of communicating both and just letting your limited partners, your partners, understand a lot of what's going on. Lane, to finish it off, any additional things that I missed that you think should be communicated to folks out there?
Absolutely, Paul. And you did a great summary there. Thank you. What I would tell people is, just like a fireman or a city, you're always going to have a fire. It depends and it matters how you put it out. And so as a property owner, whether you're the best or the worst, there's going to be challenges with that property. There's going to be challenges with that project. There's going to be challenges with your partnership. Guaranteed, it matters how you put it out. And what you're saying, Paul, is communication is so important, because in this dynamic, changing and choppy market, there's a lot of things that change rapidly. And that may mean a pivot to your business model, your plan, but it's really important that you communicate that clearly to your partners, to your limited and general partners, your mortgage brokers, your agents, everybody that's associated, because bad communication causes confusion. Confusion causes conflict. And so you want to avoid that by, as best you can, in timely communicating what's happening and how that may impact it. And that's what we try to do. It's obviously a work in progress continually, but that's our efforts to communicate transparently the marketplace, the conditions, and how the project's performing.
So great information from Lane Bean at Legacy Pilot. Lane, can you give me how people would get in contact with you? What's the best way for them to do it?
Sure. You can go to our website and connect with me directly. And our website is pilot-legacy.com, or you can email me at my name, period, Bean, Lane, Lane, period, Beene, at pilot-legacy.com.
So great information from Lane Bean. I certainly do appreciate it. Again, the theme today was of the podcast was really protection. And so, Mr. America, I certainly appreciate you being on the podcast today. We look forward to seeing you next time. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. Have a good day.
Thanks for listening to the Old Capital Real Estate Investing Podcast. Please join us at oldcapitalpodcast.com to sign up for our weekly email updates. We'll see you next week for another great interview.